Yeah, basically, when we are talking about local governments, we need to go back to the Constitution of India, particularly the 73rd and 74th Amendments. Earlier, also, right from the days of India's Constitution, right from 1950 onwards, there was always a constant, conscious effort to empower the local governments. Actually, those days, the systems were not yet in place. It started with the idea of community development. Later on, full-fledged Panchayat Raj systems came into being. But then they were not enjoying the constitutional protection. It was during Rajiv Gandhi's time that the government of India made a conscious effort to ensure that the local governments in this country stand protected. So in order to provide constitutional guarantee to these local bodies, he had proposed amendments to the constitution. Unfortunately, during his time, for want of a majority in the Rajya Sabha, these constitutional amendments could not be adopted. Subsequently, during P.V. Narasimha Rao's time, the government of India was able to somehow convince various political parties, and even though P.V. Narasimha Rao government did not have a stable majority, somehow, because of his statesmanship approach, he was able to get the two bills, that is Constitution 73rd Amendment and the 74th Amendment. Both these amendment bills were adopted and they became the law. So today, right now in India, we have three tiers of governance. One, the central government. Second one is the state governments. And the third one is the local government. Here, we need to be very clear. There is nothing like, the first, second, and third. All three sets of governments are equally important. And every set of government, that is the national government, the state government, and the local government, they have their own list of powers where they have to exercise. Now, coming to the 73rd and 74th Amendments once again. So, today we have the constitutional protection for these local governments, that is one. To ensure democracy and to protect democracy at the grassroots, two very important centers were created. One, the State Election Commission, and two, the State Finance Commission. Unfortunately, what happened or what's happening in India today is that the state governments are basically jealous and suspicious of the local governments. As a result, we see a very unfortunate scenario in this country where the local governments are suppressed by the state governments. In spite of the fact that we have a separate state election commission, I'm very sorry to say that these state election commissions have not performed independently. That is, we see them working as per the directions of the state governments. As a result, elections to the local bodies in quite a few states of India, they are not held by calendar, that is one. And there are long gaps between the periods of elections. That is, when the term of a municipal corporation ends, actually the election process to elect the next municipal corporation, members of the municipal corporation, that should have started automatically. But unfortunately, we don't see that kind of a scenario. As a result, we notice huge gaps between the elections of the municipal corporation. Particularly, Hyderabad is a classic example when we had huge gaps, 8 years, 9 years, sometimes. That means that the local bodies do not have guaranteed existence. Elections are not conducted as per the calendar, and special officers are appointed. Now, this very concept of special officer is a dictatorial concept. The special officer is not elected by the people, and therefore he is not responsible to the, there is no sense of responsibility except he reports to the boss, that is the chief minister of the state government. Here, I wish to bring to the notice of our friends that we in this country, at the national level, all the powers in this country are listed into three categories. One, the central government. Two, the state government. So there is a central list, a state list, and a concurrent list. Now, concurrent list is common to both center and states. Both the governments can come up with legislation on different subjects enlisted in the concurrent list. But in case of a conflict, the law or the enactments made by the central government, they are valid. Similarly, after the 73rd and 74th amendments were adopted, we now have a list for the urban local government and also a separate list for the rural local government. Now, much depends upon the spirit of the people who are there. They have to be very clear. They need to exercise the powers in the context of the goals of local government. Now, today we are talking about climate change and local government. Climate change is a beautiful subject, it's a very important subject. And at the global level, the situation is so scary that it calls for a global imposition of emergency. There are many things that the local governments can be doing to address climate change. First and foremost, here we need to be very conscious that we the people, we normally expect the nations of the world, which are right now meeting in COP27 in Egypt, we expect them to come up with radical resolutions, voluntarily, each nation spelling out its strategies to reduce their emissions. At the same time, when after the conference, they have to come up with legislation at the national level and also create institutions to address, to implement the legislation. For example, in India, we have the Prevention of Water Pollution Act 1974. Pollution control boards were created in 1976. We have the Prevention of Air Pollution Act 1981. And the task of implementing this particular act was given to once again to the Pollution Control Board, which was established in 1976. Now the question is, in 1986, India came up with the Protection of Environment Act 1986. After this, a proper institutional mechanism has not been created till date, even as we are discussing the subject today. India is supposed to be the world's largest democracy, the second highest populated country in the entire world. It is the biggest open system. Yet, India does not have Environment Protection Authority. And I think, in my opinion, this has to be done, it has to be created on a war footing, and many a time even the Supreme Court had commented and questioned, directed the central government to set up the EPA. Irrespective of the parties that were ruling center at the national level, whether it was Congress or BJP or any other combination, all the national governments in this country, they failed in their responsibility by not creating EPA. And the same thing, the state government also, if they wish, they can create EPA, but none of the states in this country, they took the lead. As a result, we don't have an independent, autonomous environment protection authority. Now, when we come to the local governments, I'll give you the example of Hyderabad. We have the great GHMC, the Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation, and we have innumerable other agencies which are supposed to take care of the needs of the Hyderabadis. For example, HMDA, Metropolitan Development Authority, and then we have the Metro Waterworks and the Sewerage Board. We have Hyderabad Metro to cater to the metro train services. We have so many other agencies, but the GHMC has no say when it comes to the coordination or control over these organizations which are supposed to take care of the needs of the Hyderabadis. As a result, we find just as there is chaos on the roads of Hyderabad when it comes to traffic, so also when it comes to governance, we find utter chaos. There is no coordination between the electricity department, the water department, the sewage, the metro waterworks, the irrigation department. Because we have a river running through Hyderabad, or Hyderabad has been located beside on the banks of River Musi, and GHMC is blissfully helpless when it comes to protecting the River Musi. Similarly, when it comes to health, education, or you take up anything, law and order, GHMC has no say. The police commissioner, the municipal commissioner, and every other administrative officer is directly appointed by the state government. Now the question is, what is the role of the state government in a municipal corporation? Why should it be there? So we have the state, as already pointed out, We have the central list, state list, and concurrent list. In the state list, entry number 5 is local government. Now, this particular entry that is in the state list, which is supposed to be a power to be exercised by the state government, that should have been deleted or transferred to the concurrent list along, and there should have been a mention to that effect in the 73rd and 74th Amendment. Unfortunately, that has not been done. As a result, today in India, all the local governments, whether it is urban or rural, they are suffering like anything. They are not empowered in the real sense, and a huge chunk of India's population, more than 45% of the people today, they live in urban areas, but they have no say when it comes to governance. Their what we call exercising their will on their destinies. So, what is the biggest stumbling block here? As a political scientist, we have had several discussions on this subject, and myself and my friend Subbarao, we, Narasimha Reddy, and so many others, we discussed in Hyderabad Democracy Forum, and we are convinced unless entry 5 in the state list is transferred to the concurrent list, we cannot empower the local bodies in the real sense. Now, friends, before I request our distinguished speakers to speak, I have just one word, one more point, and that is I wish to remind our friends that there is what is known as a doctrine of implied powers. Now, this has been developed by the American Supreme Court over a very long period of time, and though initiated by Chief Justice Marshall, one of the greatest of the judges in American Supreme Court. Today, America is effective. It is strong. It is continuing to be strong because there is decentralization in the real sense. And the credit goes to the Supreme Court, which deliberately, intentionally, they read between the lines of the Constitution. And they, taking the spirit of their Constitution in mind, keeping that in mind, they came up with judgments which spell very clearly and which talk about the doctrine of implied powers. I hope in the days to come, the local governments in this country will be empowered in the real sense so that the people living in for example, if we are taking a village, the Gram Panchayat, if the people living in the village, they should be masters of their own, future. What we are witnessing, unfortunately, today is that the corporates, the richest of the rich, and the local political bosses, the state governments, and the local musclemen, rowdies, all of them are looting what is now accepted as the common property resources of the people. వాగులకెళ్ళి ఇసుక మాయమవుతుంది, పక్కకున్న గుట్టలు గుట్టలే మాయమవుతున్నాయి, అడవిలో చెట్లు మాయమవుతున్నాయి. There is no track record of the biodiversity. The biodiversity registers are not maintained, and it is again not a namesake, register. There is no active people's participation or consultation process. Grama Sabhas are organized, once again, naam ke vaste. Hardly 20 people, 30 people, they sit together and everything is, managed in such a way that in every village, whenever in the name of Grama Sabha, democracy is being murdered. The same thing we can witness in urban areas, where when we talk about the Basti committees or the ward committees, they are virtually not there. And even if some of the states in this country, if they permitted a Basti committee, they are not functioning in the way they were supposed to. As a result, I can tell you, friends, during the last 75 years, democracy is being murdered almost every day. And the biggest villains in the entire activity, it is we the people again. We were supposed to be vigilant. We are not vigilant. We don't exercise our power. We don't question. We don't demand accountability of our elected corporators or the sarpanches or the Gram Panchayat members. And we keep mum when an elected sarpanch is taken to task by the collector, who after all is a public servant. The voice of the people is being suppressed. So let there be discussion, because unless we the people, each one of us realize, and unless each one of us adjust our lifestyles to in such a way that we can be reducing our individual carbon footprint. Unless everybody, every citizen, every human being in the entire world, they need to reduce their carbon footprint, they need to reduce their Anthropocene print. And this is a matter of urgency. But to do this, the political system should empower the people at multi levels, including the local government, state government, and the central government. Now, with these few words, sorry I have taken a little extra time, but I now request Sai Bhaskar to please continue.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, sir. Now we have other speakers. You can invite Ramesh Gupta Garu and others.
Yeah. Suresh Babu, Suresh Gupta
Suresh
Garu.
Gupta.
మిగతా వాళ్ళం పిలువనా? ఇంకా వేరే వాళ్ళు రాలే.
అందరికీ ఈరోజు COP27 దాంట్లో జరుగుతున్నటువంటి కాన్ఫరెన్స్ లో భాగంగా మనం సంతోషంగా ఉన్నది. మళ్ళీ ఒకసారి పురుషోత్తం రెడ్డి సార్ని లైవ్ లో చూస్తుండడం. సో విన్నాను, వారు చెప్తున్న ప్రతి మాట చెప్తున్నంతసేపు ఈ నన్ను అనేక ఆలోచనల వైపు తీసుకెళ్తా ఉంది. కొద్దిసేపు అటు, కొద్దిసేపు ఇటు. సో మళ్ళీ చివరిలో సార్ చెప్పినటువంటి కంక్లూడ్ చేస్తున్నటువంటి సందర్భంలో చెప్పినటువంటి సో సెల్ఫ్ లైఫ్ స్టైల్ ని అడ్జస్ట్ అనేటటువంటి ఒక వర్డ్ ని సారు చెప్పేసరికి మళ్ళీ అంటే ఇమ్మీడియట్లీ ఏం చేయాలి అనే దానికి అక్కడ ఒక దగ్గర నన్ను మళ్ళీ తటస్థం చేసుకునే అవకాశం దొరికింది నాకు. సో ఇది సార్ చెప్పినది ఇప్పటికే ఈ మధ్యనే ఐక్యరాజ్య సమితి, యునైటెడ్ నేషన్స్ కూడా దాన్ని గుర్తించడం, యాక్ట్ నవ్ అని చెప్పేసి చిన్న చిన్న లైఫ్ స్టైల్ చేంజ్ గురించి చెప్పడం. అదేవిధంగా లాస్ట్ ఇయర్ ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ COP26 సందర్భంలో కూడా లైఫ్ స్టైల్ చేంజ్ ఫర్ ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ LIFE అని చెప్పేసి చెప్పడంతో పాటు క్యాంపెయిన్. సో ఎవ్రీడే ఒక చిన్న థింగ్. సో ఎట్లా ఒక ప్లాంటేషన్ చేయడము, లేదు బయటికి వెళ్ళేటప్పుడు ఒక వాటర్ బాటిల్ తీసుకెళ్లడము, ఒక క్లాత్ బ్యాగ్ తీసుకెళ్లడము, RO వాటర్ ని మళ్ళీ రీయూజ్ చేయడము, ఇంట్లో ఉన్నటువంటి ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ గ్యాడ్జెట్స్ అంతా కూడా రీసైకిల్ ఇవ్వడము, ఇట్లా 21 days. సో వారు చెప్పిన ఏంటంటే ఎవరైనా ఒక వ్యక్తి 21 రోజుల పాటు దాన్ని ఆచరిస్తే హ్యాబిట్ గా మార్చుకుంటారు అనేటటువంటి ఒక దాన్ని బేస్ చేసుకుని వారు ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ గారు పీపుల్ ని రిక్వెస్ట్ చేయడం జరిగింది. కానీ ఎప్పుడైతే మనం సభలు సమావేశాలు జరిగినప్పుడు ఏ ప్రైమ్ మినిస్టర్ కానీ, ఏ పొలిటీషియన్ కానీ, ఏ మినిస్టర్ కానీ వాళ్ళ వాటర్ బాటిల్ వాళ్ళు తెచ్చుకోవట్లేదు. సో జస్ట్ నేను అగైన్ ప్రతి ఆఫీసర్ని ప్రతి దగ్గర కూడా అది రిక్వెస్ట్ చేస్తా ఉన్నాను. సో మళ్ళీ మనం అందరం కూడా ఆ రకమైనటువంటి దాంట్లోకి కామన్ మ్యాన్ అండ్ సొసైటీస్ ని ఇచ్చేయడం. సో ఎట్లా వాళ్ళని రీచ్ కాగలము ఏంటి అనేటటువంటి దాంట్లో యాజ్ ఏ కామన్ మ్యాన్ గా ఉన్నటువంటి నా యొక్క పరిధి ప్రకారంగా కొన్ని కార్యక్రమాలు చేస్తాను. బట్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ఆర్గనైజేషన్స్ వాళ్ళతో కలిసి కూడా ఎట్లా వాళ్ళలో చేయొచ్చు అని చెప్పేసి. సో డెఫినెట్లీ దాన్ని ప్రభావం చాలా పెద్ద ఎత్తున ఉంటుంది సార్. సో నేను ఇంకా భవిష్యత్తులో ఉన్నటువంటి CGR తో కానీ ఇంకా CGR కి అనేక సంస్థల్ని కోఆర్డినేషన్ చేయించి ఆల్రెడీ ఒక టెక్నికల్ ఎక్స్పర్ట్ టీమ్ కానీ తర్వాత సైంటిఫిక్ డాటా కానీ అన్ని కూడా మనకి CGR లో ఉన్నటువంటి అటు గ్రౌండ్ లెవెల్ అయితే ఏంటి, అటు సబ్జెక్ట్ వైజ్ గా నాలెడ్జ్ అయితే ఏంటి, లైక్ సాయి భాస్కర్ అన్నా కానీ మిగతా టీమ్ అంతా టెక్నికల్ టీమ్ ఆల్రెడీ 60-70% ఆఫ్ ద నాలెడ్జ్ వాళ్ళ దగ్గర ఉంది. సో లైక్ పురుషోత్తం రెడ్డి సార్ దగ్గర ఉన్నటువంటి ఆ అనుభవాన్ని వారు ఎప్పటికప్పుడు తీసుకొని చేస్తున్నారు కాబట్టి సో ఇది ఒక స్టార్టింగ్ స్టెప్ సార్, బేబీ స్టెప్స్. సో ఇనిషియల్లీ కొంచెం అయ్యో ఇంకా నేను జస్ట్ ఐ ఎక్స్పెక్టెడ్ కనీసం ఒక 100 మంది ఉంటారు, జాయిన్ అవుతారు అని చెప్పేసి అనుకున్నాను. ఎనీహో సో స్టార్టింగ్ లో ఏదైనా చిన్నగానే అవుతుంది. ఇట్ ఈస్ గుడ్ ఆల్సో. సో థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్. సో థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్.
థ్యాంక్ యూ సురేష్ గుప్తా గారు. ఇప్పుడు ఈ సబ్జెక్టుకు కనెక్టెడ్ ఇంకా కొన్ని విషయాలు ఉన్నాయన్న, పర్టికులర్లీ ఇండియా గురించి. మన సాయి భాస్కర్కు తెలుసు, we the people, we were always living in a symbiotic relationship with our background ecosystem. మనం ఈ దేశంలో బతికిన తీరు చాలా గొప్పది ఇప్పటి వరకు. We have been living in harmony with nature. For example, the people living in the forest, they were always respecting the limits of nature and they considered the forest as their mother. That point. Similarly, people living on the coastlines of India, on the river banks of India, in the grasslands of India, or in the mountain ranges of India, or in the very fertile deltaic region. I can very comfortably say that till 100 years ago, or even till independence, we the people were organizing our activity respecting the limits of nature. In other words, we never exceeded the possibilities and potentialities of nature. That is why when India became free, still, even though the Britishers had looted this country, but still our ecosystems were very healthy. Our rivers had clean water, our forests were full of biodiversity, our grasslands, very productive. And on the whole, though politically we did not have freedom, but environmentally speaking, people living in different ecosystems, they were happy. They were supposed to be happy because in this country, we also, on our own, individually, every citizen lived a lifestyle which can be described as minimalistic today. There is a minimalistic movement worldwide, and there is a demand that we reduce our needs and, reduce our carbon footprint. So, but that actually we the people were living exactly in the same manner. So it is this lifestyle which we the people in this country had practiced. That lifestyle has to be once again revived. I'm happy recently the government of India made very strong efforts to revive this what we call environmental our lifestyle not exceeding the limits of nature, confining ourselves to what is known as greed, because, and I once again recall the great words of Mahatma Gandhi. He was always, telling us, reminding us that there is enough in nature to meet the needs of all, but not sufficient to satisfy the greed of the few. So, if in India, if we have to ensure that everybody is happy, One, they have to reduce their, greed, just simply focus on their needs, adopt a lifestyle which we used to have, that is respecting the limits of nature, and ultimately ensure that the essential needs of everybody is taken care of. The question what now arises is, right now, particularly in North India, the crisis is very serious. Air pollution is threatening. Even as the world is discussing this subject at the global level, in Egypt, in Delhi and other cities, in North India, the situation is very frightening. And in fact, in a book entitled The Ministry of the Future, they have very clearly indicated that the Kinetic plain, particularly UP, Bihar, and that belt, it is likely to witness wet bulb syndrome. And they have very clearly explained that it is going to threaten, it's going to be a big killer in the days to come. Are we aware of this? The question is why there is no discussion in the political parties. I have always been saying that every political party must have an R&D, research and development wing. Every policy has to be definitely discussed in that research and development wing of every political party. And these public policies have to be discussed, understood, formulated into legislation. And all this, can happen only when we go in for a major paradigm shift. ఇప్పుడున్న మోడల్ ఆఫ్ డెవలప్మెంట్లో ఇది సాధ్యం కాదు. ప్రతి పొలిటికల్ పార్టీ కూడా ఒక మేజర్ అంటే వాళ్ళ థింకింగ్లో డిఫరెన్స్ రావాలి. ఇప్పుడు మనోళ్ళు ఏమనుకుంటున్నారంటే పొలిటికల్ పార్టీస్, దే థింక్ దట్ ఎనీ ఇండస్ట్రీ ఇస్ ఎ సింబల్ ఆఫ్ డెవలప్మెంట్. And they are throwing open all the doors to welcome the corporates of the world to come to India. And the state governments and even the central government is viewing it as development. As a result, India is now being looted by transnational corporates. That is when we, the people, are collectively becoming poor because the common wealth of the people is being exploited. And Indian political parties are working very hard only to satisfy their multinational corporates. This is not just in India, it's happening worldwide in several countries. And this model, which came to be promoted after 1991, after the collapse of Soviet Russia, is popularly, it was encouraged in the name of LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And in this scenario, right now, there is such a confusion in the entire country that nobody knows what development is. No chief minister ever cared to explain what development is. And as a result, and particularly in the states of India, because most of the state governments are in the grip of dynasties, and that is detrimental to democracy, to the people, to sustainable development. And with this kind of political systems in place, we cannot fight climate change. A change in the climate is possible when everybody becomes a partner in it. Every citizen has to play the role expected of him or her, and they have to reduce their carbon footprint. They need to undergo a radical transformation at the individual level, and collectively there should be a major paradigm shift in favor of environment and ecology. Unless that is done, things are not going to happen. I'm happy others have joined.